ladies and gentlemen, and allow me to start as well by thanking Capital Link, Nicos, Olga, and the whole team for another excellent event, I would say. As Nicos said, we are the last panel of the day, but hopefully an exciting one. So let me put the scene a little bit. We all work in a unique and exciting industry that we often declare the fact that shipping is the backbone of international trade and the principal supplier of the world economy. The seaborne trade today is standing above 11 billion tons. And of course, through the last decades, shipping, the world fleet had grown a lot, both in number of vessels, but also in terms of tonnage, in order to cope with this increased demand. We build ships, but ships have a useful certain life and then need to be renewed. So, looking at the evolution of the fleet renewal ratio, we can very easily detect that this is very much related to the new regulation coming into force, which can be related to the phase-out or to older designs or older technology that becoming obsolete. A particular case was the one of the double hull tankers, where we see the evolution of the fleet renewal ratio increasing from the normal of 15–70% at the level of 50%. Today, we are in an avalanche of new environmental regulation coming both from international and national authorities. The big difference is that these regulations are not prescriptive, like the one I mentioned before for the double tankers, but they are more goal-based, introducing environmental performance metrics and market-based measures connected to these metrics. This market-based measure, I will say, they are added to already complex equation of chartering selection process. Owners need to deliver a fleet competitive, environmental friendly, which will carry the products all over the world, even at the lower cost that we are today. And this cost includes a big part of all types of carbon emission charges. So competitiveness and decarbonization are very fully related, and owners, they have, and they will have a lot of dilemmas to face. One of them may have a Shakespearean flavor, as my colleague Dr. Kokkarakis often say, to build or not to build. And of course, if you look at the prices of the new building, you are very often lean towards the second option. So, a lot of questions for how long the current fleet be competitive, what the owners can do to improve the environmental footprint, and thus the carbon-related costs, how a possible investment we do in new fuel technology, even if that technology is mature and with low risk, coincide with the fuel availability and a sustainable price. How long we can keep going with the existing fleet? Is carbon capture an option? Is nuclear energy an option too? The industry is desperate for answers and a guidance to find a way forward. Fleet renewal doesn't mean necessarily competitive vessels. Many are waiting for the first movers and pioneers to lead the way. Historically, we, the Greeks, have not been the first movers in terms of technology or even new ship types. But Greeks are often the owners who capitalize on, refine, and take advantage of the new trends. What is more, Greeks have always been the ones to turn challenges into opportunity. We're delighted to have this afternoon a panel of distinguished guests with whom we intend to discuss a lot of this hot subject. Each one represents one or more of the major shipping segments in which Greek shipping is thriving, but also actively investigating the way forward that will provide the competitive edge. So I'm delighted to welcome Mr. Kalogiratos, CEO of the Capital Product, Mr. Aristides Pittas, CEO of the Euroseas, Mr. Loukas Barmparis, President of the Safe Bulkers, Mr. Nicos Rescos, Chief Operating Officer of Star Bulk Carrier, and Mr. Vasileios Lampropoulos, CEO of Thenamaris. In the course of the next 34 minutes, we will exchange our view on these important issues, and I would like to start by raising the first question to Mr. Rescos and Mr. Lampropoulos and ask them, what actions have you taken or plan to take now that are not related to alternative fuels that can have a marked effect in the environmental performance and competitiveness of your fleet? How long can such measures take you before having to inevitably proceed to new orders? Mr. Rescos, would you like to commence?
Thank you, Paillette. Nico and Olga, thank you for the invitation as always. I think a lot has been discussed already today. In the hour I've been here to listen on the topics. Everyone is trying to work on different alternatives leading eventually to new fuels in some time in the future. Star Bulk is not a newcomer to emission abatement technologies. As you know, we are fully invested on scrubbers. 98% of the fleet is scrubber fitted, which provided the base to develop the company further. We have a large base of professionals dealing with vessel performance monitoring and energy efficiency, which has helped us move into an intermediate step. You asked about solutions and how much can they really assist the transition. I think everyone is aware of EEXI. We're using shaft power limitation to deal with our performance and GHG ratings. We are installing energy-saving devices. We're doing robot technology investments, and we're testing various technologies, silicon paints, and we're also investing into carbon capture technology, which of course is still early days to be able to have a tangible effect. We have been surprised to see that the theoretical values of energy-saving devices are actually quite real, especially on the big ships, where there are real savings on fuel. And we're quite busy on the operational side of an improvement. For example, we're dealing with a better optimization, voyage optimization of our ships, whether this has to do with optimizing the route in terms of weather, the actual fuel cost involved, the dollar we're being paid per ton, in order to optimize the profile of the vessel. Eventually, we're going to be replacing some of the vessels that still have MC engines, not many of those. But I think these are all steps that everyone is more or less considering. Some have more captive technologies that are trying to develop. I think your second part of the question about what's happening with the long term, there is a tremendous uncertainty. We see it in 4 pillars. Technology needs to be developed. The safety of the fuels has to be guaranteed. We need to make sure that there is growth of fuel supply. So can you really deliver fuels in non-liner ports for a shift in the industry? And more importantly than all, regulation. So I think we still have some time to go before we decide on new buildings.
Thank you very much, Nicos. Vasily, what is your view on this subject?
Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the opportunity to share opinions. Although as we are the last panel, I'm afraid a lot of the opinions have already spoken. I believe it's becoming clear that the energy cost will increase. The requirement for additional energy, the requirement to go to a greenhouse gas more friendly environment will only create an environment where the cost of the fuel, of the energy, regardless whether whether we are talking about existing fuels or new alternative fuels, will be expensive, will be very expensive. In order to be able to tackle, we need to focus further on the increasing efficiency of the vessels. The last 10 to 15 years, a lot of things have been done in order to increase the efficiency of the vessels. Shipyards have been more, let's say, approachable in order to look at the whole operating profile of a vessel, not a single point of operation. This led to more optimized hulls, better matched propellers, better matched main engines. In the second hand vessels, in the vessels in operation, we have experimented with various technologies for reducing the energy footprint. I will say most of them successful and quite promising. As we move to more expensive fuels, I think we can experiment more with technologies which have not been promoted because are expensive or because we have alternatives that we can play with. And personally, I believe there is a lot of room for improvement in the existing vessels, but also in the design of new buildings. We have a lot of things that we can do in the engine room, in the accommodation areas, in the various systems on board the vessels, in the cooperation of the systems and subsystems on board. And I believe in the next period we will have a lot of opportunities to further study these alternative technologies which have not been studied substantially. And, of course, efficient operation of the vessels will be needed. Thank you.
Thank you, very interesting indeed. I agree with you, we have a long way to go and a lot of things to look at. I would like to ask Mr. Barmparis a key question now. What will be your policy when you are considering a new order? Will you wait for shipyard-ready designs, or you will try to request specification based on the preferred technology you have in mind? How possibly do you think will be the latter, considering the very high current new building prices?
Again, thank you, Paillette. We need to say that as a company we have adopted very early a quite pragmatic approach, so it's not a decision about what we will order in the future. We have ordered 11 ships. There were phase 3 ships that the regulation, as we know, is coming after 2025. We have already taken delivery of 2. The price that we took, we bought these ships were very low compared to today's prices. We have already, these 2 vessels basically that have taken delivery are the best performing in terms of energy efficiency vessels in the market, in Kamsarmax and Post-Panamax. So we have done our part in terms of a new building order. We have also an upgrading program for our existing fleet. It is mentioned by all our colleagues here, most of us were doing similar things, ultra-low friction paints and ducts and various other energy efficiency devices that will expand the life of the existing vessels. The truth is that if you have a Japanese built vessel, it gives you certain characteristics that, in terms of energy efficiency, that you can further compete in the future compared, let's say, to a heavy Chinese vessel, which was built, let's say, from 2003 until 2013 or so. The idea behind that was that we don't expect that the alternative fuels will be available shortly. Probably we think that this will be towards the next decade, 2030. There might be pilot projects here and there, and also efforts to expand this, the production of alternative fuels. But still there is a lot of way, and we couldn't expect to wait for, let's say, 10 years to make an order, or 5 years to make an order when another ship will be available. On the other hand, I always thought that LNG dual fuel could be an alternative, but it seems that the regulations do not favor LNG dual ships, so that's why this approach cannot be continued. Maybe methanol ships or ammonia ships or hydrogen ships are possibilities, but all these fuels are very brown or very black because they are produced from not renewable sources. So we need to expect and be pragmatic. I think a pragmatic approach is phase 3 vessels right now.
Thank you, Loukas. Current circumstances, as we said, all time, a high level of uncertainty. Mr. Pittas, will you be willing to break ground and order a vessel with innovative equipment and alternative source of energy? If not, why not? And if yes, how you can minimize the risk of your investment?
The answer is no. A very, very clear no. We have placed orders recently for 9 container ships powered by conventional engines, but with all the improvements that have been made up to now in the conventional technology, which result in the ships burning 40% less fuel oil than similar ships, similar size ships produced up to 10 years ago. So these are very economic ships for today. I also agree with Mr. Barmparis that we will not see the new generation ships in the markets before the early 30s, and then again it will be very few ships, and it will take at least a decade before the infrastructure is there to use them. We're not going to take that risk. We have always been a shipping company governed by the usual traditional Greek way of doing shipping, which is very, very simple. Try to buy ships when they are cheap, try to sell them when they are expensive, and in the meantime, try to operate them as best possible. And of course, we are trying to operate them as best possible, taking advantage of the existing technology, cooperating with all the other sectors that are involved in shipping. Mr. Rahim's presentation earlier was a very nice one, showing how collaboration is needed between all stakeholders, exactly. And we are working together with our charterers. On the container side, we are lucky to be working with the major container lines, which are investing a lot of money, a lot of effort in trying to solve the problem, because we all recognize that we have to move towards more sustainable shipping and towards the goal of 0 emissions by 2050. I think the industry will achieve it. We need the assistance of policy, because we all comply with policy and regulations, and it is coming, and we will see more regulations that will favor more economic ships. So, coming back to the question, no, we will not be the first movers. We don't know what the future fuel will be. It might be none of these things that are considered today. I will not be surprised. We might somehow use the fuel oil that exists today and take away somehow the CO2 emissions of it, or change it or produce it in a way that's economical. I don't know. The answers are still unclear for such an investment in a shipping company.
Thank you, Aristides, and it is so true that for the first time, I believe, in the shipping industry, we need to have a real commitment from all the stakeholders in order for us to find the way forward. We look at the order book and we see that shipping companies in the tanker and dry segment, they are very reluctant to place any new building order. Mr. Kalogiratos, you are in a company with a very diversified fleet. Do you see different drivers and incentives in the LNG and container counterparts? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Paillette, and good afternoon, everybody. There is definitely a lot to untangle there when you look at the different order books across the main commercial segments. A dry bulk order book is close to 7%, tanker order book around 5%, and then you look at the container order book, which is close to 27%, and of course LNG order book at 45%. You would think that they are in completely different market phases, and that is partly true. But I think this time around there is more to it. So tanker market is now recovering, but it went through 2 very bad years in terms of earnings, probably one of the worst earnings we have experienced for decades. And that could go some way towards justifying the low order book. But then you look at the dry bulk segment, where we have had 2 very good years in terms of earnings, actually the best that we have had for a decade, and there the order book is again very small. So it is clear that there is reluctance to order, and it has to do with uncertainty around regulations, propulsion technology, alternative fuels, and the plethora of technologies that are currently being discussed. But in terms of what is really tangible, what you can do today, what you can ship designs you can order today, it's very little. There is definitely a lot of improvement, but we're not really talking about radically different ships. At best, you could look at dual fuel LNG vessels. So I think, as my co-panelists already outlined, there is the uncertainty, and there is a lot of resistance towards ordering today new types of ships. And some owners have said, we're not simply prepared to go ahead. I mean, look, and then you look at the prices, and that's another, of course, deterrent. However, when it comes to the container and LNG order books, there are different factors at play. Firstly, both of them have good market fundamentals or good markets. I mean, the container market is coming off one of probably the best market we have seen in a century. And we have seen exorbitant demand for vessel capacity. Liners were looking to find capacity at any cost and were willing to fix forward, and of course that led to new ordering. But this has been always the case. But I think what is different when it comes to container vessels is that they are high energy consuming ships. They steam at higher speeds, and as a result, the technological improvements that are available today, they do make a big difference when it comes to containers. And ordering new ships today means more energy efficient ships, so it means smaller energy bills for charterers. So given the structure of this segment and the speeds that container vessels are used at, it does make sense to order ships and take advantage of what is available today. Secondly, when it comes to containers, don't forget that down the chain there is the consumer. So the consumers are now increasingly more aware of emissions across the logistics chain, and they demand products with a lower carbon footprint. That forces the retailers, the Walmarts and the IKEAs of the world to ask the liners, the Maersk and the MSCs and so on and so forth of the world to lower the carbon footprint. And of course, then the liners will order ships to the extent that they can that have a lower carbon footprint. And Trump owners like us, they can also provide new ships, order new ships that can provide to the consumer what they're looking for. So this is a slightly different market as well. Finally, the LNG market. Again, they are unlike oil and coal. LNG is expected to be a transition fuel, so it's not coming off anytime soon. In the short to medium term, demand is expected to grow, so there is demand for new capacity. But technology there has made a radical change in freight economics. And the higher commodity prices that we are all experiencing today, unfortunately, means that the delta between older technologies and new LNG technologies, so two-stroke versus DFTs and DFTs versus steam, is now huge. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars per day simply because of freight economics. That is boil-off, capacity of the new ships, and of course energy efficiency. So this, together with the fundamentals of the LNG market, has driven the order book where it is today. I should also add that the new technology ships have a smaller carbon footprint and they're more energy efficient. The issues with methane slip, which were issues that the TFDs had and certain first generation two-stroke ships, are now being addressed through different technologies. So overall, there are different factors, and we have been at the forefront of that. We have ordered a number of containers and LNG vessels, and we can see also the demand coming from charters.
That was a very clear answer, and thank you very much. Extending all the usefulness of existing tonnage is a very tempting option till the landscape becomes more clear. Mr. Rescos, carbon capture is considered by many as a very attractive option that can extend the useful life of the existing tonnage, but also a possible option for new building. Considering that Star Bulk has already substantial investment in emission abatement technology, what is your views on the prospect of this technology? I kindly ask you all to be a little bit shorter because we will run out of time. Thank you.
I will be very short. Carbon capture technology has been around for years, and we see it on land. The challenge in the maritime space is how do you condense equipment, and what do you do with consumables you need for the process or for the liquefied carbon. So that's the challenge everyone is trying to deal with. Naturally, because we are scrubber fitted, you need a scrubber to be able to work on a carbon capture technology. We are well ahead with that game. We're testing it in the lab in November, and we're installing the first unit in January on an Ultramax. Expectations are positive. We're not talking about 30% carbon capture with the first trial, of course, but we're counting on something around 10%. And if that's feasible, then we're going to work on how do you deal with consumables you need for the process and whether you solidify carbon produced or you liquefy it. We think it's an intermediate step. I agree with Mr. Barmparis that the new fuels will be around 2030 onwards. Tangibly possible to install such engines and actually use them efficiently. And unless something changes to the regulation, we accelerate post-2026 with emission reductions, carbon capture may play a role, although still it's a technology that is being developed.
Thank you, Nicos. Let's move to the very hot topic of CII, and I would like to ask Aristides. If CII is used as a metric of environmental performance in charterers comparing ships and bankings for providing finance, we have seen that operational circumstances that are not in the owner's control, like port waiting time, have a very big impact. Do you see a better communication or contractual terms coming into play with charterers and banks to take into account such factors?
This is a good question and a bit political, but indeed both banks and charterers are all saying that they are extremely interested in reducing the carbon blueprint of the vessels they finance and charter and all that stuff. Most banks today offer these new sustainability-linked loans, which have a slightly smaller interest rate that you pay if you have a very low CII. This is very little, though. In fact, it's more marketing and commercial stuff than really being of essence today. We've got a couple of such loans, and yes, if we meet certain requirements on some kind of measure of our greenhouse gas emissions, we get a 0.1% reduction in our interest rate. It's not huge, but we all say that we do it, and we do it. It's a step, but more needs to be done. On the chartering side, I think, and especially by the major charterers, all major charterers, I would say, both in the container sector, but also on the dry bulk sector, there is sincere interest to reduce the carbon footprint of the ships that are being used. So these, the major charterers are doing a lot of work and have started talking to us, and we talk to them about how we can reduce the various indices that we have to comply with today, and regulations that we have to comply with today, and jointly agree on measures that have to be taken. Especially regarding CII that you mentioned, CII is something that depends on how the vessel is trading. It's not just a number that comes out of the particularities of the ship. It depends on the speed, it depends on the time you spend at port, it depends on many things which are charterers' obligation. So the big charterers who really care about their image are coming to us, and we're talking together with them, trying to find ways to improve our CII rating. I have to tell you that we have, and all of us, we follow and we monitor what our CII per vessel is today, and we have sister ships, and some of them are ranked B and some of them are ranked D, which is a huge difference. It's because of the way they are trading, the charterers realize it, we discuss it all together, and we're trying to improve on that. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. It's happening, as my COO, Marcos Vasileios, said in a previous panel. BIMCO is trying to create a clause which cares for both the charterers and the owner's interests. It's very difficult, but we both recognize the need to do something, and we're all working on that.
Thank you, Aristides. Very interesting. Loukas, at the present, with the advent of the low-carbon fuels, allow me to say that we are going through another propulsion revolution after steam and diesel. Can you estimate the time frame when this fuel will be available for shipping?
I could say maybe yes or maybe no, because we don't know exactly what will be the alternative fuel. I mean, some people could invest in CO2 capturing, but in my personal opinion, I think it's easier to install nuclear reactors in ships rather than collect the CO2 from a ship, which is much easier to be done in the land. So I think that probably we will see in the future collection of capturing of CO2 in the land and the preparation of alternative fuels which will be used in ships. So this could be a solution. I think in terms of steps, I would say that the first ships that we may see could come as early as 2026 or 2027. There will be pilot projects of several fuels, and maybe the first solutions, the first actual solutions will be towards, after 2030.
Thank you. Vasileios, we hear a lot about biofuels. How can SEEB tackle the competition with, in the demand of the specific fuels from other sectors of the industry? We are in a strong competition with aviation, I would say.
It is clear as we move to greener fuels that will be significant competition because the demand will be higher than the supply. And in order to be able to use these fuels, because this biofuel is practically a drop-in fuel for the existing fleet, you can easily mix to a certain percent with the existing fuel you have on board, and you can burn with your existing engines. So in order to be able to go around this competition is to focus also on an alternative fuel that is not a primary and natural candidate for competing industries like aviation. For example, if you select hydrogen hydrogen I will expect not to be the primary candidate for aviation due to the density and the volume required. So maintain flexibility with a fuel which is not a natural candidate from your competition can be a solution.
Okay, thank you. Of course, there can hardly be a concrete answer at the moment, so a lot of speculation. The uncertainty of future fuels is lately bringing up more and more the term of stranded asset. What is the scenario that may lead to a stranded asset? Jerry, you want to? Sorry.
So I think that going forward, let us take a page from the LNG, for example, industry, where you might see this in a more distinct way. In situations where vessels are increasingly falling behind regulations, as for example steamships compared to other types of technology, and at the same time, in terms of economics, they do not provide what newer ships can do. I think you will find that they will have to slow steam when their competition is going at the normal industry speed. They will have to increasingly invest more in CapEx in order to be compliant with CII requirements. So at some point, these vessels will not be economically viable and they will be forced to retire. So I'm sure that we will see such type of assets, yes.
Thank you. Nico, maybe you like to add some comment on that?
I think owners in principle are quite focused on not speculating at this stage. Speculation remains limited on the new fuel, and this is getting an asset stranded is basically not being able to repay or depreciate the asset once the new fuels do come out, and you have 2 or 3 options that are truly global for everyone. I think the main issue still comes back to regulation. Should something change, whether it's with methane slip or perhaps even the CII index, which is now under discussion again to change, taking the wrong bet today and not being able to have the support from the regulatory framework, or let's say you have a 2-tier market when regulation is not truly global, so not everyone is on a level playing field, that could create a serious risk to a new building order, unless of course you tie it up with a very long time charter.
Thank you. Does any one of you see any single fuel as having an advantage or early availability in terms of technology? This is, I mean, if anyone would like to say.
I mean, there's not much out there, right? I mean, LNG is the only one that's out there where you have infrastructure in terms of bunkering, where you have actual ships, you have established technology. I mean, burning LNG in main engines goes back now decades. I mean, the rest, I mean, you have some drop-in fuels that work today, but they're in extremely limited quantities. So I'm not even sure if there are many other alternatives out there.
Anybody else would like to say? No. Okay. I want to ask something more, Jerry, because maybe you are more involved with that. All the benefits of decarbonization technology we see now enjoyed by the charterer, not the investor, the ship owners. Should owners who pay for the technology be financially rewarded for their investment?
That is a great question. You know, I ask charterers of all types, LNG, container, dry, tanker, how do you treat carbon emissions? And obviously everybody has a policy and they want to reduce their footprint. But I think I've heard very few answers where carbon footprint, carbon emissions go into the P&L of the traders when it comes to cargo. And if they don't get paid, if they're not incentivized to reduce carbon emissions in a monetary way, then they're not there to pay up for the owners that invest in carbon abatement technologies. Of course, energy efficiency, so a smaller bunker's bill, everybody is willing to pay for because this is actual money. So right now, I think people are, they talk the talk, and a vessel that provides a smaller carbon footprint will be preferred, but it won't command a premium, and as such, a return for the investment of the ship owner. Unless we see more market-based measures like ETS that is being introduced in the EU, or the IMO is discussing right now, or similar measures where the party that benefits from the goods transportation pays for the externality, because effectively there's externality that nobody pays for, then I don't expect also to see owners get a return. And I think this is where we should be heading, because otherwise technologies, new technologies, do not happen from immaculate conception. There has to be R&D, there has to be money spent. In order for this money to be spent, owners have to be incentivized to invest.
So true. So, as I said in the beginning, I think we are Greeks proof for many times that we have managed to turn challenges into opportunities. So I would like to ask the last question in all of you, starting from Vasileios. How will create advantage of this uncertainty, and how different may Greek shipping look in 20 years from now? Vasileios.
I think the first step is to maintain what we do quite well in Greece, focusing on efficiency, maintaining flexibility wherever we can, preparing for the future, for the transition to new fuels and new challenges, preparing to take informative decisions timely and implementing them, which is very, very crucial. I think we are quite well prepared for this. I think this is the recipe. How the shipping industry will look in 20 years is very difficult to say it's the future. 20 years sounds a lot, but for the shipping industry are only less than the life cycle of a vessel. The future can be simply a new landscape with multiple fuels and different installations on board the vessels, fragmented, different fuels supplied due to the lack of availability, but can also be a completely new way of approaching shipping, a shipping industry which has been rethinked and reapproached. The shore side should be integrated fully in order to be able to have efficient transportation. We can rethink fully the technology on board the vessels, and we can have something which is completely different from what we see today. As Dr. Rahim said, in order for this to happen in a short time, we need to approach it together. If we leave things to develop by themselves, we will have the evolution of species, which means that it will take a lot of time. The solution will be probably better than what we will do in a short time, but it will take a lot of time.
Thank you. Nico will discuss a lot on this. You are always quite innovative, so inspire us, be the visionary of...
I think uncertainty always brings opportunity. Greeks have always been proficient in taking advantage of this uncertainty. I think this time around, both the international market and particularly the Greek shipping market is taking a cautious view to developments. I think we will all try and make our ships as efficient as possible, at least until 2030, in order not to be handicapped and having to slow steam. A two-tier market or even three-tier market will develop, so we need to stick close to our charterers, participate and give out freely our emission results and help them develop their own AR on actual cargo carried and not deadweight, which is the main flow of CII. I think the new generation of Greeks coming in is inspired by the history and the seamanship and the new technology. So I don't see the position of Greek shipping any different to what it has been during the past few decades.
Thank you, Loukas.
I would agree with Nicos, and in fact, we all need to have very large technical departments in order to support the requirements of the new regulations and be informed at an early stage. We need to take quick decisions. This probably in 20 years from now will lead to larger companies because you need a really big analysis, substantial analysis on what is coming. Of course, I don't think that the industry will, the oldest ships will survive after 2030. So new ships will come to be to play a very important role, and the people who will be early movers will be able to take advantage of that.
Aristides, I don't remember if I asked you a similar question in 1993 when you offered me my first job, but I will keep a note now and see in 2042 what will be the case.
Okay. It's always very difficult to predict the future. Greece is 0.1% of the global population, but we control 20% of the world fleet. Is this going to be sustained in 20 years? China is 100 times bigger than Greece in population. Will we manage as Greeks to be at the center? The numbers do not seem very promising, I have to say. However, on the other hand, the people that are involved in shipping and that run the shipping business, which is the human capital. Why did Greeks become so big in shipping? Because we were the seafarers of the world, and some of them developed into the ship owners and all that stuff. Today, we still, as Greeks, control the biggest companies in the shipping world, and we have the task to try and keep that going like that. So it will depend on our human capital, on how many people we are able to inspire to continue what our generation has been doing, and take a global business and keep it here in Greece. So whilst the numbers look very, very pessimistic, I think that by growing the Greek companies bigger, we have maybe 500 companies running 2 or 3 ships. They should consolidate. I don't see how in the future we will have that. But developing some very good, strong Greek companies, which are truly international companies, we can really continue to be extremely important in this business and successful.
Thank you. Jerry, you have the last word.
Well, I think we have voted with our feet. I mean, in terms of the uncertainty, we think that we need to take advantage of the technologies that are available today. Otherwise, analysis by paralysis, or the other way around. But we have ordered more than 45 ships over the last 2 years, worth more than $5 billion, and effectively renewing our fleet across the different segments. So we believe that we have to provide a service to our customers and take advantage of the cycles as well as the uncertainty. This is what we do. This is shipping, right? We cannot just sit back. And I do agree with my fellow panelists here. I think we will see further consolidation. Don't forget that this has already started. 20, 30 years ago, we had 1,500 companies in Piraeus, potentially more. Today we have less than 400. It is the challenges of the future, environmental compliance, which will mean different propulsion systems. I mean, you will have to have a gas engineer, potentially an engineer that knows about ammonia. You will need somebody who knows about carbon capture. So you will have to keep a very specialized and big pool of seafarers. You will have to, regulatory compliance and sanctions compliance nowadays is a huge thing. So all of these point towards more consolidation. That is for sure. But I think we have done pretty well until now. We have adapted perfectly. So I'm pretty confident that if anything, we'll do better in the future.
Thank you all. I believe we all agree that we need a modern, healthy shipping industry to have the world running. We all know where we have to go. The big question is how we go there and how fast we can go there. There's a lot of uncertainty in regulations, technology, and which is hindering the fleet development and strategic decision and our decarbonization effort. Our mission, your mission, is to ensure the proper way forward, and we hope that during these last 40 minutes, along with our distinguished panelists, we managed to bring some certainty on this uncertainty. Thank you.